welcome to the October meeting of the Philipstown Conservation Board. And I think we should do this every once in a while, periodically introduce ourselves. So I'm Andy Gower, the chairperson. Bobby Meadow.
Lou Kingsley.
Max Garfinkel, Wetlands Inspector.
Scott Silver.
Madeline Rand.
And Madeline is our newest member, and we have one other appointee who is not here this evening. Okay, so we're going to begin with the violation on 529 Route 9D, Rymsha and Doe. Good evening.
So we are putting down jute mat. It's supposed to be installed by the end of this week until we get our plans submitted and approved. Because I think we're going to miss the planting season this year, so we'll have that up until, I guess, next spring.
And you guys retained Beatty and Watson and Stephen Marino to help?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
And the jute matting is going on the south side? North side of the property, excuse me, right? North side?
The
The
yes,
right.
the north
Coming out,
side.
yes.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
wooded slope that's, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
All right, I think
So,
that's really about
we'll
all
await
we
your
can do
plans.
right now.
Yeah, thank you for listening to our
Well, what
requests,
about
for
the
sure.
side of the driveway? You know, that was just a big washout risk as well, the side by the driveway,
By the rock
by
ledge.
the big rock, yeah, on the opposite side of the driveway.
That's why I assume you've engaged Beatty and Watson to have an engineer come with the drainage plan.
Right, where we were talking about
Yeah.
they need some drainage there, but
Yep.
that seems to be needs to be stabilized.
Yeah, so any exposed soil that's not, that's, doesn't have vegetation in it should be covered. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Great,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you. Steensma and Prins? Unless you don't want to go next.
Good evening, and is the mic on, or? Okay,
Yes.
great. So at the last meeting we were at in September, the Conservation Board essentially asked us to prepare a number of other documents, a mitigation plan, some cutaways, cross-sections, a construction sequence, and we also added 2 photos that would, with a sketch in of how it would appear from the river and from the internal road to the south. And we included, as an accompaniment to the mitigation plan, a preliminary septic system design from Beatty and Watson. There was a site visit after that on October 1, and at that site visit, Andy said that Ron Gaynor, the town engineer, had requested that we provide a detailed steep slope analysis. And today I met with Beatty and Watson, and we went over what Beatty and Watson thought he was interested in seeing, and what we would propose to submit would be either 1 inch to 10 feet or 1 inch to 5 feet of just the area where the project would occur and any other disturbance would occur, showing an overview of the steep slope disturbance with a different color for the reasonable proportion around it versus the actual structures. We would also show one for fill, and we would show one for the drainage and silt fencing, and we would also show a cutaway from the south, the east, the west, to show what the hillside would look like cut away. If there's anything else you would like to see in those drawings, please let me know, because it's much harder, obviously, to come before you and then say, oh, there's 3 other things we'd
Right.
like to see.
Yep, we appreciate it. Do I have comments from anybody? Me? Yeah, any,
I think one of the additional things Beatty and Watson can put together is formalizing this mitigation plan on an actual plan set sheet included into that series of documents you were talking about. So just like you were talking about with the erosion and sediment control plan, having that formalized, even though you've drawn it here, in a little bit more detail with planting callouts in each one of those
A
sections.
little more detail of what?
What's that?
I couldn't quite hear what
Like
you were
planting
saying.
callouts, you've highlighted sections where you said you have a willingness to focus on working in on this plan.
Oh, that's on the mitigation plan?
Yeah, so if you had Beatty and Watson develop one more sheet in that plan set with your areas located on that plan, and then also what you're intending to do in each one of those areas like you listed here. And then anywhere that you said willingness to, I would just expound on a little bit more detail in terms of what you would be planning to propose to do there as mitigation.
Okay. At the site visit, I had a discussion with the people who were there, where there were a couple of other additional areas that I don't think are in that little note that might be feasible, but that I would really appreciate some input from the Conservation Board. There is an area just to the south of the stream, about 100 feet in from the road, where there was a lot of knotweed. And I got, pulling it up, going in every week and knocking it down, and it's just about gone. But mishmash has been growing up in its place. So it seemed to me that that is an area that either some of the plantings that didn't take from when the bankers did it, or something else that we think is more likely to survive. It's a little higher, half a foot to a foot higher than most of the marsh. So that is definitely one area that's possible in addition to what I talked about in there. And then we also briefly discussed that field between us and the railroad. Part of it obviously is on railroad property, but they're happy for me to do whatever would make it look better. And the other area is the bank from the playhouse going down to the wetlands from the south, where I would have an interest over time in putting in a series of plantings of native rhododendra, azaleas, mountain laurel, things of that nature to take up that bank under the tree cover.
Okay.
So if you want, I can do some more delineation of that as possibilities. The map that you have in front of you is basically the wetlands map from 2013, that the next iteration of it had, the plants that bankers were going to take out and the stuff they were going to put in. So I stopped, one iteration short of that. The wetlands boundaries are maybe a little different than they would be today, but I figured for this purpose, they're probably close enough.
I think you should be cognizant, though. You're asking for a lot from us. So when we did the site visit, I know I spoke to you and Jason, and I believe MJ did as well, that as much as you can move both the bedroom and the pool addition / garage, either out of wetlands or out of steep slopes or in a previously disturbed area, i.e. we had talked about, can you shift the atrium / bedroom more onto the patio? The more that you can do for that makes it makes it easier for us to permit and not setting a precedent that we're uncomfortable with. So
Yeah,
when
but-
you're doing this work, this has to be a compromise, and I would think about what you can do.
Okay, well, we have thought about that, and as you know, we very much scaled down what we were gonna do over by the pool. It's harder to scale down the addition, and if I shove it over right next to the patio, then you don't see the waterfall, and you're sitting, 10 feet away from the other windows in the home. So it's, I think that's a difficult one to do very much about. I can talk with our architects to see if we can make the addition, a little bit smaller.
I think it's worth your while to speak to your architect, how you can, I'll use the term, flow more into the land. Because
I'm
I
sorry,
think
flow?
flow more into the land. I think you can use some of the terrain there rather than to try to fight it. That's my recommendation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was gonna say, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves with, talking about mitigations here. I'm still on the concept of this property here, and as we said when we were out there, that breezeway, well, I understand the goal of being able to walk up the steps and see the waterfall. I do believe there's an alternative design that somebody could come up with that you could still accomplish an entrance in there and see that waterfall. Again, that's what an architect is for, but pulling that away from the steep slopes, as best as possible, and as away from any of the, sensitive areas would be appreciated, to have a concept design to consider.
We want to get you as, the work you're going to engage now, we want to get you that much closer to something that we would be able to permit with good conscience.
Okay, and by
Right.
sensitive areas, you're talking about, for the addition, it's the stream bed. But the stream bed is below, basically at a lower elevation than anything we're talking about. And it's got a 2-foot rock wall between it and anything else, so I'm not sure from that point of view how sensitive it is what we're doing on the hillside away from it. I mean, it's your judgment. You're the conservation
Yeah,
board,
it's,
but I'm not quite seeing it.
You're in a disturbed site, but how much more does it need to be disturbed in terms of runoff, change in terrain, and so on? We want to work with you.
Yeah, well, I think there are ways to, basically, there's not going to be any more runoff than there was. And I don't think it really has to be more concentrated either, because we can, underneath the slab, we can make for 2 feet of depth, 3 feet of depth. And right now, of course, there is no runoff problem. We never have channels in our driveway from any rain, including the aftermath of Ida. And if we didn't get it then, we're not going to get it. So I think the mitigation of making sure that water all has a place to go is the key there.
Right, we understand that, but how do we put it? A lot of the previous construction that was done there was pushing the envelope of what would normally be done. And I think that when it was approved over time, it was sort of thought of that really not much more would be encroached upon. And now you're proposing to encroach upon further. So what I'm saying is, we're willing to work with you, but we've told you our concerns. Work with your architect. You have a very good engineer with Jason. Let them come up with some solutions, because I think they can.
Yep, okay. I got it. And
You going to say something, Rob?
I was just gonna let him finish his thought.
yeah, and then it would be good to hear from the board as soon as we can, some signal, we're going to try and work with you on this. Because at some point, I got to have the architects do real construction drawings and all that
Right,
sort of
we
stuff.
understand, we understand.
I'm a little reluctant to just turn the spigot on.
Right.
I think one of the dilemmas we have right now is that, and a lot of us have been on the board for a long time, and so we've seen multiple properties, you know, yours as well as the prior applicants, properties came before us for other reasons before. And, you know, each time a landowner brings the property here, they're always asking for something that pushes the envelopes on these more and more constrained properties, you know. And so we have been, as a board, working with each of the applicants to do the best for both the town and the applicant. But at some point, you know, every time somebody comes up with another idea and another change, you know, it kind of defeats all the things that we did in the prior application to like now expand it out and do it over here. Like, okay, so.
Yeah, I agree. You don't want to see an 8,000 square foot house on that property. It doesn't work.
Yeah, but-
We're sensitive to that. I think what we've tried to do is only something that settles into the hillside that is inobtrusive, and, you know, that gets us a bedroom on one floor for when we get really creaky. And my last question was, did the board have thoughts about that alternative site on our neighboring property, which we thought raised scenic overlay problems and other issues, but I'm not sure, that was part of the reason for the site visit.
Right, you're talking about, correct me if I'm describing it properly, it's on another parcel that you own, it's to the south, and it would be following that, the road of yours, the driveway, would be to the east.
To the west of the pool. Yeah,
Right.
pool would be to the east of the road.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I thought that was an
Yeah, I
area.
think if we put it down in the lower meadow, A, you're closer to wetlands, and B, you could disturb habitat for, you
I
know, like
thought
the
that-
bobcat likes to hide out in there. He isn't gonna hide out if we've got a swimming pool, you know, right there.
Yeah, I thought that you did not want to have a pool there, period.
Yeah, we would much prefer not, but I know it was a topic for that last site visit, so.
I mean,
If the
are you
board
all
had
familiar with what
views-
the spot he's talking about roughly?
Yeah, the last spot we looked at.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't think that was a preferred area.
so,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, and then Max, I know Jason needs a letter from you to be able to do a test hole for the septic
well, that was
system.
another thing I wanted to, I guess, touch on was, I don't know if the board had any interest in hearing further about the septic system that you're looking to update with, and any additional information in regards to the higher standard you're proposing to put in there.
Yeah, that's the highest standard I know of. If somebody's got a higher standard, I would look at it. Jason says that the town, for what we want to do, will not permit a peat system, and that the Fuji system is as clean or as good as a peat system. And the Fuji clean system is one where you've got a septic tank, which then has microbes and aeration in it. So the effluent that comes out of it is not necessarily drinking water quality, but it's pretty high quality effluent. And the system from them that we would look at also is certified to reduce nitrogen by at least 50%. And that's not in the peat system. So he said that the Fuji clean system is one that the county likes, it knows, and would work in your site. The peat system, he didn't think in the end would work.
And this Fuji system has standard trenching, like trenches and a expansion area?
Yes.
Is it something that the board would want to consider looking at? I mean, a lot of what I'm saying is administrative. I think Bob's points are important too. I'm not trying to overlook that. But, you know, clay barriers, I mean, the site is so constrained, and the expansion area and where you're proposing to put the initial treatment area as well, I mean, is all within, you know, I mean, you're right on the stream bank, essentially, if you move into that expansion area.
Well, the existing trenches are, they start, according to Polhemus, about 15 feet west of the septic tank, which is tucked kind of relatively close to the hillside. And then they stop about 30 feet before you've got the bank that runs down to the wetlands, and none of them are within probably 75 feet of the stream bed.
Right. So I'm talking about like the reserve area here. I mean, if that were ever to be used, what protections could we ensure? I mean, other than having that the upgraded system.
Oh, that's the reserve area.
Right. So in the future.
You're never going to approve a 6-bedroom house here, so we're never going to use the reserve area.
Well, the
But
reserve area,
But Putnam County wants you to have designated a reserve area.
but the reserve area, the main thought behind it is not for expansion of the home, it's for complete failure and unrepairability of an
Yeah.
existing septic. I read a little literature, and I'm not an expert on the system you propose. I mean, it seems eloquent. The main use of the trenching, rather than to further biodegrade, is actually just mainly, as I understand it, dissipating water.
Right.
As long as the system doesn't fail.
Right.
You know, and that just has to be maintained.
Yeah, I mean, if there's another system we can hook up to it that does yet something further before the effluent goes into the ground, we'd certainly be happy to look at that. In most areas, not Putnam County, but in most areas, you get a trenching credit for a Fuji Clean system. Putnam County has decided they're not giving people
Right.
credits for basically anything.
Right. Yeah, as I said, you probably, when you come back, you should, or beforehand, have Jason supply us with some electronic literature from the manufacturer. But as I said, I looked at it briefly, and it looks like a sound system.
Yeah, there's
I mean, it
there's
looks
a
like a good
technical sheet
alternative.
of
Yeah.
about 5
Yep.
or 6 pages, I think, that I can probably get.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's a good alternative, the only devil in it is it needs to be maintained.
Oh,
It's-
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not something you just forget about and pump out every once in a great while.
No.
That's okay.
And in fact, you gotta change the blower like every 5 years, they say. Last thing on my mind is that for the steep slope, the detailed analysis, what Beatty and Watson said is have your architect do it, and they'll look it over. And I just wanted to make sure that works for you. Glenn said, yeah, an architect can do this, or we can do it. Why don't you have your architect do it? We can look at it.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on that is if Glenn or one of his engineers is gonna stamp the plan, because it's not an architect's expertise to do a survey or an analysis of steep slopes, I'm fine with that. I don't know if we would be fully comfortable with an architect stamping a plan that's a steep slope analysis.
Yeah, okay, because
Right.
it's off Beatty and Watson's survey, including I had them separately survey that whole area with 1-foot contours, where they actually specifically
Right.
measured it, rather than go off the geo maps
Right.
on the computer.
On a small confined space like that, it would normally be that they would be using what geo maps exist and where necessary, then field checking it.
Yeah, whereas this is based on the field
Right,
measurements.
I think that's fine.
I think for the septic, I think what we look for when you're close to these sensitive areas is some type of additional mitigation. I mean, it's really not up to us to dictate, that's up to your engineer to make a proposal. I don't think we've ever seen the proposal for the Fuji system before, right?
No.
I don't believe I have.
No, we
The Pete has
haven't.
been the
Yeah,
general one, but we're not the experts by any means, so obviously there could be better systems, and we're happy to entertain that for sure. But it's the mitigation, like, so when there's an encroachment into a sensitive area, having that engineering mitigation to help prevent something is what we're looking for, these
Yep,
these
yep,
type of
no,
mitigations,
I
right?
fully agree.
Right, okay, so that's one
In
thing.
fact, last year I asked Steve a question about the water in the wetlands area. He said, yes, that marsh is doing exactly what we want that marsh to be doing. So. All right, we'll try and prepare all of that for you and get it in front of you. And I know it's a complicated site. I'm not sure anybody down the road would want to do a whole lot more with it, but, I'll be dead and gone, so.
What I'd like to talk about there, so in this property, so we have seen this property before, and one of the things that comes up is, especially with the small structures that have been in these properties, over time, many years, right? There's a foundation there, then someone comes back and wants to build on that foundation. So one of my concerns is, and again, I think we talked about separating these two parts of the project, the bedroom on one part and the pool on the other.
You mean as different permits?
Different permits, yeah. But the pool, right, and now you're putting a foundation in there, you're building a structure there, a pool house, a garage. It's building a foundation that in some future generation could come back and say, well, I want to put another structure there. Now, today it's a pool that, you're enjoying for, recreation and exercise. Down in the future, some other board might have to entertain that, well, that's an existing foundation. So is there a way, if we chose to allow a pool there, that couldn't become an existing foundation in the future? Because I just feel like this is a hodgepodge property that has a lot of structures that were, the playhouse, as you call it, on the hill there.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful piece of property right there. Couldn't build in it unless there was a prior foundation there, which there was basically a cinder block foundation. I don't know how inhabitable it was at the time. Water under the bridge, so to speak, that's been built, right? So, but again, this is what we're up against here with these properties. Foundation burns down, a house burns down, someone wants to build another house on the foundation, even if it's, 50 feet away from a stream, and an existing septic is already there. So, how do we get out of this and stop perpetuating this?
Well, I will certainly think about that. I spent 40-odd years as a lawyer, so I would think there are ways to condition an approval or to get something in the record, right, so that I can't look the other way while the real estate agents tell people whatever they want. I don't think we have a problem with that. This is not a property that should have, great big structures on it.
All right, well, there's a lot of there's one on the top of the hill. I think that's a garage up on the top of the hill, up those big steps that came from that back patio by the waterfall, right?
Yeah, and the garage again, well, they didn't even touch that. That's been there for God knows how long.
Right.
He did put up a shed. I don't know why he put the shed up, but I guess he asked for it, and the town said we don't care. So there's a little 10 by 15 foot shed there. Doesn't serve any real purpose except storing cardboard before it goes out on Royal's truck.
Yeah, it's unusual for us, but, to your point, Rob, if, the board was comfortable, certain, I'll use the word, it wouldn't really be easements, it would be covenants that would be put in the deed, if that would make this more tenable. That might be another way to go as well.
Covenants.
Yeah, because it would be covenants, because I know a land trust wouldn't be interested, but, perhaps this additional mitigation would be covenants that, in a certain area, the pool could never be converted, it'd have to stay a pool or just be dismantled, it couldn't become a building and so on. So that might be food for thought as well. But I'm just thinking out loud, if you will, right now.
Yeah.
But,
I'm just bringing it up in this
Yeah, it
case
makes
because
sense.
this property clearly has had this issue before, so we just don't want to create another one.
but I would suggest you get materials to us sooner rather than later, So if we have questions, or if we want to see something else, if you're planning to be at the next meeting, that hopefully that can be addressed, so you're ready for it when you come in for the next meeting,
Yep, okay,
right?
will do. Thank you for your
Thank-
time.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Okay, so we're gonna move on to Welcome Homes, 1557 Route 9.
Good evening, and we're back. Steve Marino, Tim Miller Associates. We heard the board's questions at the last meeting. We've prepared a response that I hope everyone was able to get in a timely manner to some of the questions that had been raised. The first question, and I'll let McGillis answer the engineering aspect of it if you have any questions about that, but was considering the use of some kind of advanced system for the septic area. As just came up in Mr. Prins's application, we did look into the options of pretreatment systems for the septic with the thought that in many municipalities, a pretreatment system allows for a reduction in the size of the trenches. And by reducing the size of the trenches, then we could decrease the size of the impact in the buffer area. However, as was also pointed out, Putnam County has some ideas about what you can do as pretreatment, but that doesn't in any way affect what they consider to be the conventional system that they want to see. It's just kind of belt and suspenders rather than a different kind of system. So in looking at that, the cost and maintenance of a pretreatment system, we thought that without some kind of credit for reducing the size of the actual leaching area, that didn't really make sense for this particular property. So that's where we stand on that question.
But in regards to pretreatment, again, the same discussion that I just had holds, right? So obviously this is a difficult site, very constrained, not sure that a septic in that location is the best location for it. A pretreatment system is some type of mitigation that provides, as you said, belts and suspenders. It wouldn't be intended to reduce the size of the trenches. It would be there as an additional way of mitigating runoff, contaminating into the wetlands.
Well, we did look into that question too, and I think I do discuss that regarding the cross-section through the septic system and the actual elevation of the wetland below. Although we're relatively close to the wetland, we're also quite a bit above it because it's just this bump on the site that creates the building area. So when you get to the bottom of the trenches, we're anywhere between 9 and 11 feet above the elevation of the wetland, and that's at the lowest trench. And then as you go further up the hill, so although we are closer to the wetland, there's a lot of soil underneath that system to treat the effluent before it gets to the water table. And there is, as part of our approval, because of the proximity to the wetland, a clay barrier at the downstream side of it, so that there isn't any lateral movement that can get into the wetland. It all has to go down before it can get into the groundwater and across. I can talk to my client about the possibility of considering a belt and suspenders approach. That's not where we are tonight so far, so that can be part of our discussions. And if you don't mind 1 second, I'm one of these people. I have close-up glasses and far-away glasses, and it's very inconvenient. The dates of the testing came up, just for confirmation. We did confirm that the deep holes were done in 2004, which is why when we went out there, we could see that things had grown back and it didn't look like there had been a machine out there recently. Deep holes in that area were done in 2004. Perk tests were actually done in 2017. Both were done by Beatty and Watson and were witnessed by the health department. And the health department confirmed the data for both of those tests when they approved the septic system in this location. And I just want to point out also and remind everyone that when this property was subdivided, when all the houses on this several houses on this little street were subdivided, generally with a subdivision map, you show a concept of where houses and septics can go and where testing was done. And this is the location that was approved, or in concept at least, at the subdivision stage. So we haven't tried to move things around to where they don't belong. You know, at the subdivision, it was proven out that this appears to be the best location for the house and the septic on the site. Again, considering that it is a difficult site. Regarding the size of the house, we have provided the floor plans, footprint, and elevations of the house. It's a 2,900 square foot house with a garage underneath. There's not a separate garage. It's not the garage isn't an addition to the house. It's a modest footprint of about 2,000 square feet. Again, garage is underneath the building. It's not a McMansion. It's not an 8,000 square foot house on a lot that can only support a 2,000. You know, it's a small house. The first page of the plans does show a depiction of the house. Again, it's a relatively small house. It's a modest-sized house. And when you look at the floor plans, you can see there aren't a lot of hidden den offices on the second floor that we're not calling bedrooms, but can actually become a bedroom by putting a door in, that kind of thing. We know that that's not an uncommon application in houses, some of the larger footprint houses. Here we have a small office on the first floor, along with the living space, kitchen, living room, etc. And then there's 3 bedrooms on the second floor. There was questions about the survey. The site survey was completed by a New York State licensed surveyor. We did submit the package, the building permit package, to the building department before it was referred to the Conservation Board. Greg didn't have any issues with setbacks, any issues with height, any of those kind of issues. The survey is where the property is. I know it's unusual when we were out there to see that a portion of the driveway that comes into the site and it fronts on this property, which is where the driveway to the proposed house would come off of, is actually on this property. And that a portion of the lawn across the way is actually a part of this property. But those are the property lines for the property, and that's how it was surveyed. And then the question came up again about height and bulk and such. And again, we've gone through the building department process. Greg hasn't indicated that there's any bulk requirements, zoning setbacks, height requirements, anything like that that would require variances from the ZBA. Everything as proposed meets the current zoning on the property. And that's where we are, unless Vergillis, you want to add anything, or if we just want to wait to see what the board has to say.
Comments?
Yeah, that's better. We've all been out there. We know it's not the easiest site you've ever looked at, but we have restrictions with wetlands on both sides, and we're trying to do the best we can with what we have here.
Where's the well going?
The well is right there. Up front, on the opposite side of the house from where the septic is, on the other side of the slope, basically.
And that's what relationship to your neighbors' septics and other properties' wells?
The closest septic is right over here, which meets the requirements for the offset distances, which have been confirmed with the Department of Health.
Okay. And then where's their wells? Any wells in the area as well? I just want to make sure that you consider those. I mean, you're supposed to, but we've asked before and been surprised.
It's currently not on the surveyed area, so it's well beyond the limits.
Okay. Well, I'd ask you to just check.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be on the survey as long as you just check and, just to give us that level of comfort.
Yes.
Comfort.
No problem.
So a question for you, Max. The heat system that was recently approved on Old Main Post Road,
Right.
there's no trenches with that, or am I mistaken?
I don't believe so.
So how was that then approved?
There would have to be some, just to interrupt, there would have to be some kind of disposal area. Again, as was pointed out, with whether it's the Fuji system or there's, treating the water in a separate pre-treatment kind of system is one thing, but getting rid of the water afterwards, there'd have to be some kind of dry well, some kind of trench system,
Right,
some
my
kind of.
understanding of the heat system is it goes down versus the Fuji system is more going out.
Yeah, I mean, their engineer on the Old Albany Post Road project was an employee of the Department of Health at the county level, and so he's designed those before. So it was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the system. Is it basically a trench system that
No, it's a peat system,
is like a sand filter, but a peat
Yeah.
filter? kind of
peat,
thing?
and, yep. And then it's essentially, I guess it's your septic tank, your peat system, and then different forms of, different gradations of gravel and sand, I believe, till eventually it all goes down,
It's like a drip system, yeah.
right? Now, what was used on Old Albany Post Road, I believe they used 3 of them in a
Yeah,
row.
it's a series of 3 boxes essentially that are filled with peat.
Far less impact
Yeah.
in terms of clearing and filling.
There was recent discussions with the health department. I'm just trying to, this is Andrew Hacker.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Vaccaro. I'm a civil engineer with Welcome Homes. So totally understand the need for additional treatment, and we've discussed this with the health department, and we had gotten their feedback in preparation for the meeting tonight, and it was our understanding with that discussion that they're not opposed to that system, but again, it would not reduce the size of those trenches. We'd be glad to continue to look at other options here, but I think from our discussion with them, I wasn't aware that it was really going to be that much of an option for them to reduce any disposal field size.
Yeah, I think we're looking for additional mitigation beyond what's required by the health department. That's kind of the approach that we take to these situations, where it's a very constrained site. So then how do we mitigate any potential risk here, of fouling, wherever fields that aren't fully functioning, get flooded, so there's something else, just
Sure,
to make sure
understood.
that the clay barrier is great, but that's not enough,
And
So something
I
else
would
that's
like
aerobic,
to, Yeah, in response, I would like to point out that, from the bottom, the area from the bottom of the trench, the area of where the treatment and the infiltration actually occurring, between that and where the wetland level is, there's actually a notable distance there. So I would consider that even additional treatment for water quality in itself, because there's additional distance, and it's going to create an environment for additional filtration. Biological materials going to absorb any contaminants to a further extent than a normal system may. So I think there's some benefit to that distance as well.
It is, yes, true, but it's not an additional engineered system that's been put there specifically for that purpose. That's what we're looking for.
We're in a tough spot. I mean, we have a lot that's been pre-approved, or grandfathered is really the word for it, because it would never have been allowed today. But, one of the things we've asked, and we ask all the time, is what alternatives can be. And in this case, I'm not sure what the alternatives are. Is there a different placement of the house? Do you reduce the house to 2 bedrooms, so you reduce the septic system? Yes, I know the homeowner doesn't want it, the potential homeowner doesn't want to hear that. But I think you need to I think you need to look at and work with the Board of Health what might be done with a peat system to lower the impact, and what else can you do? 'Cause
Yeah, I mean, the mitigation plan was something that was on the table early on
and
as
what-
well.
Yep.
Yeah, in terms of a planting plan, we had talked about the restoration of that gravel road driveway around the back of the property. That's all still on the table. We did want to get past this septic stumbling block before we invested any more time in preparing a final plan, a final mitigation plan.
Yeah, and I'd just like to clarify, we'd be glad to, further explore the mitigation as a condition of an approval here. Certainly something that we would be glad to propose on the project to, add the resource value of the wetland itself. Again, like Steve mentioned, I think that the house is very modest in size. Our client's here with us tonight, Richard, and he's very much looking forward to moving into the town. He has a young family, and he's looking forward to raise his family in this town. I think the idea of trying to reduce the size of the system by lowering the bedroom count is a nice idea, but not so much practical, especially for Richard's case, it being that he's looking forward to moving in with his family, and he does need that space. So I would ask if you would please consider that in your decision as well. But again, going back to the mitigation, I think that's a great idea, and we'd be glad to look into that further.
I think that's where we are now, is go back to the health department and see if there isn't anything we can't do to.
Right.
if we can't make the septic area any smaller, thereby reducing the impacts in the buffer, at least having some kind of level of comfort that the effluent getting into the system at least is as clean as it can be before it's discharged.
Right, and also consider, you're building a house that's also within the buffer. So that's a disturbance too, I mean, we do need a plan of not only how you're gonna mitigate for that, but how you're taking care of, stormwater.
Right, and there are leaching, dry well or
So, yeah, so the
cold tanks.
And I think we'd like to see as little clearing, the homeowner might not be in love with that, but we'd like to see as little clearing as possible. Keeping, woody vegetation, existing woody vegetation as close to the house as all possible. And most of it is not large trees, so it wouldn't be a problem, in terms of undermining existing growth or jeopardizing the house.
Sure, just the stormwater aspect, so the home itself is being collected and directed to a stormwater management system, essentially a dry
Right.
well, system that's collecting all of that. And then the driveway itself is a gravel driveway, not asphalt pavement to increase runoff.
But what I'm asking is to think about, to have as minimal land clearing for the house itself as possible. I mean, I think that would be also a rational mitigation measure.
I mean, we do show a retaining wall right up, right up against the house to minimize any disturbance further to the west, and there's a retaining wall around the back again to reduce grading and clearing back there, but again, with a young family.
Part of
having
that, part of that is just to slightly level off this backyard for the young family. So it's subtle, but yes.
We'll look at that if there's anything we can do there.
And we try to keep the limited disturbance as close to the, what we need as possible. There's no extra clearing that's being proposed, really just keeping that to a minimum just for grading purposes and to tie in as close as possible. It's not like we're trying to clear more to have, a bigger yard or anything like that. That's not the case here.
So the area in the background, in the back that you're gonna make the lawn, can you, clearly mark that on the plans when?
Yeah, and what
that
size are
area is-
you proposing? That's a very good point, Rob.
Yeah, because, again, it's important that the original design and what you say today, is available 10 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever, because things change, new homeowners come in, they cut down trees. We need to document what was agreed upon.
And this particular site, and we've done this before, both in residential and commercial, this site really begs for, put in the deed as a covenant, what is the line? Even sometimes we've required, simple fencing, post and rail fencing to delineate such.
I mean, as you realize, it's a relatively large lot with a very small buildable area, and but yeah, we will,
And
for our next submission, there'll be an area defined, as you can see that.
I think it's very much understood by Welcome Homes and Richard as well, that, any disturbance, really, there's no allowable disturbance pretty much beyond what our limited disturbance is here. But yeah, understood that you guys would potentially want some additional assurance of that. But yeah, it's certainly understood by us that there shouldn't be any additional clearing beyond what's shown here.
And I believe most of the maps you have shown us do not show the full property. Am I correct?
No, this is the full property.
Okay, it is the full, all right. I just wanted to be assured.
There's Route 9 right there.
Okay, so I was gonna ask that there be one that shows the full property.
This is it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other? Okay. Thank you. This is a tough one.
They're all tough.
Yeah, they are getting, unfortunately. Max, do you have anything?
No, nothing additional.
Okay, so I spaced. What I should have started the meeting with is the minutes. Do I have anybody that would like to make a motion to accept September's minutes?
September, so
So you can't, so we have 1, 2, 3. We don't have enough on a quorum, we're gonna have to wait till next month. No, yep. So you weren't here. Yep, okay.
Conservation Board, son's
And Madeline wasn't there, so. Okay, at that point then, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second? And all in favor?